Hi, and welcome back. So today we're in part two of how to buy your first home here in the UK. Just a quick recap. Part one was preparation, so saving up for deposit, how to build a credit score, so on and so forth. Part two is about shopping. And I know everybody loves shopping, and this is also a very emotional stage for most people when they buy their first home. And part three is the conveyancing process. So let's focus on part two today. So part two, the shopping phase, I pretty much break that down into four different phases. And these are the four different phases in this video. The first phase starts with search. So search area. And this is kind of tied to the previous phase of preparation. Remember how when we're doing your budgeting, just to do a quick search on Rightmove and Zoopla to understand how much a property costs in the area that you're interested in. And if they don't meet the criteria, maybe just sort of widen your search to a larger area or move to a different part of town that still meet the criteria that you set up, that you set out for your first home. Just a bit of personal story. When I first started looking at properties here in the UK, in London specifically, I was looking at Bethnal Green, Whitechapel, Aldgate East, Shoreditch, and they're all very expensive areas, and I couldn't afford them at that time. And something happened to my personal life. I decided to widen my search process to include western part of London. And as luck would have it, an estate agent sent me a listing in a place called Northolt. Never heard of it, but I had a bit of time on my hand and I just decided to go for viewing. I fell in love with the suburb. It's people might laugh because Northolt is semi-industrial, but to me, I love the green space. I love that it's higher up on the elevation, which means the sunlight has a different quality in Northolt. And I just love the fresh air in Northolt, and it's just peaceful. It's a very peaceful residential environment, which was what I needed at that point in my life. And I ended up buying a two-bedroom flat with a big front yard and a big backyard when I don't even know how to mow a lawn. And I fell in love with that property. It was probably one of the biggest surprise I ever have in my life in the past 7 years. So just don't get fixated to an area, and also it's really really important for you to come up with a must have and nice to have. This is where the dynamic between buying a house, buying a property on your own versus buying a property with somebody else, this is where you can really see the difference in decision making. Buying a home on your own is so easy. You just need to come up with the money and you kind of know the criteria in your head anyway. Buying a property with a partner or with friend, that's where you really have to sit down and understand what's the must have and nice to have. Very often, and I experienced this myself, when you're buying a property with somebody else, and even if the person is not contributing financially to the property, you still want the person to be happy in this property. And the person might say something like, oh, it would be nice to have blah blah blah, and you kind of just want to make the person happy because the person is your partner. What is nice to have for that person becomes a must have for the property. And next thing you know, the must have gets longer and longer and longer, and you can no longer afford something that's within your budget. As a side note, I have seen relationships breaking down during this phase because that's when tension really builds. And I have also seen people not buying properties, couples not buying properties because the husband and wife or the couple just couldn't align on what they want in a property, and they just never really have the heart-to-heart talk of, is buying a property more important to us, or is holding on to what we want in a property more important to us? It's a tough phase for couples, but really sit down and have that discussion. So once you have your search area and you kind of identify a few properties that you're quite keen on, that's when you arrange viewing. This is where I always have to tell people, don't just arrange viewing for properties that look good on Rightmove and Zoopla. Come on, Rightmove and Zoopla is a marketing tool, right? Of course, you put the best pictures possible on Rightmove and Zoopla because you want people to call the estate agent. And I would say give some of those fixer-upper a second look, especially if the fixer-upper only needs some cosmetic decoration, like just a lick of new paint, maybe changing some of the light fixtures. As long as the property is in what we call good bones, as long as it has good bones, give it a go for viewing, because you might end up liking the area, for example, or you might think that actually it doesn't cost me that much money to fix this property up. And always go to viewing with a checklist. So there are two types of viewings, in my opinion. The first viewing is a one-to-one viewing where the agent will show you the property and only you and your family members and your friends the property at that point. The second type of viewing is what I call the open house. And I personally, if I'm a buyer, I hate open house. But if I'm a seller, I have an open house. Open house are fantastic for seller, especially if the property is beautiful, is something that people will fall in love with. If it's a property that looks nice, smells nice, open house will do wonderfully well for that property. But if you're a buyer, open house creates a really emotional experience because they want you to fall in love. Open house is basically where the estate agent will tell you, okay, well, we have an open house between 10 to 2 on a Saturday morning, and your time slot is 10:15. And the estate agent will show you, oh, yeah, I have a long list of 20 people who is willing to view this property today. And immediately it creates a mentality of lack in your mind. And you go, oh my God, I'm competing against 20 people. No, you don't even know whether they really have 20 people. Maybe they only have 4. You don't know. So they will tell you, okay, your time slot is 10:15. So you turn out at 10:15. The viewer who has the 10 o'clock time slot is still, viewing the flat, but the estate agent don't care. They're still there. They let you in. They just tell you to go to different parts of the flat. And you start viewing it and you start listening to how the 10 o'clock people, they are falling in love with that place. They go, oh, I just love this kitchen countertop. I love the color and so on. And then you panic. You kind of go, oh my goodness, like I love that too. People have herd mentality. Oh, I love that too. Now I really want to buy this place. Maybe it's asking for 350, but now I'm gonna up my offer to 360, maybe even 365. I will stretch my budget a little bit. No. If you work with me, I refuse to let you go down to that way of thinking. People who work with me on a one-to-one coaching session, or they pay me on a retainer, this is what I stop them from doing. And I kid you not, I save them at least 10x, and in some cases, 500x of what they pay me, because I stop them from getting emotional. I rein them in and I tell them, look, you have your checklist. This house doesn't meet this, and that checklist. There will be a next house around the corner, which you can afford, and it is a much better value house for you, for example. And that's how I work. So people who work with me, they will have a standard checklist that they use. Some people who work with me on a one-to-one, I even tailor the checklist for them so that it's specific to the property that they're viewing and also specific to their circumstances. But you can still ask questions. Even if you don't work with me on a one-to-one, viewing is the best time for you to understand the seller. What do you need to know about the seller? Well, does the seller have chain? This is a very unique British thing. Doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, or is not as common in places like Singapore, for example. Almost every transaction in the UK, almost every, like a large majority of transaction in the UK has a chain. So for example, if I were to sell this flat, I have to move somewhere. Am I moving to a rented flat? Am I moving to a house that I'm buying? So if I'm moving to a property that I'm buying, then I am in a chain, because me moving into that property is conditioned on me selling my current flat. And so if the seller is in the chain, that's good news for you, because the seller is under a bit of pressure, right? The seller might be less fussy on what's the maximum price, but the seller will also look at, is this buyer reliable? Does this buyer has chain? So if you're a first-time home buyer here in the UK, you have no chain. That's fantastic for you. So understand, is the seller in the chain? How long has the seller been living in the property? Why is the seller selling it? And also, how much did the seller pay for the property? And sometimes you can find this information on Zoopla. So really ask these 4 questions. The thing about estate agent is sometimes they're handling so many different properties, they might not even know who the seller is. So if the estate agent can't answer you that question on the spot, send an email to the estate agent after the viewing and say, would you be able to let me know what are the answers to these questions? And depending on how the bidding process is like, sometimes the estate agent might want you to put in a best and final offer bid by Monday, 5 o'clock. And sometimes if it's a one-to-one viewing, then it's really, you just put in an offer whenever you want, unless somebody else is interested in their property around the same time. So this is the understanding the seller, which will then help you understand how much offer you would like to make. I always say the best way to, actually, I should go on to the making an offer phase. When you make an offer, this is the most nerve-wracking process you will ever experience, possibly at least in the last 10 years. Because you might have fallen in love with a property already, which I please ask you not to do that. Like, seriously, I'm asking you not to fall in love with a property until you get the keys to the property. So you make an offer, and I always say, make it in such a way that your first couple of offers are so low that it fell through and you will be rejected. If the first offer you ever make in your life for a property is accepted, I'll be really worried for you, because that means you probably have overpaid for the property. Of course, you can overpay for the property. I mean, at the end of the day, it's your money, right? But it's just that if you overpay for a property, you might need to take a loss when you sell the property. And sometimes you might need to sell the property earlier than planned. For example, you and your boyfriend, you move into this property and you thought you're going to live there for 5 years, but lo and behold, you got pregnant, and then now a one-bedroom property is no longer suitable for you. You need a two-bedroom property that's close to a good school. So you might need to bring the exit plan 2 years or 3 years earlier than planned. So it can be quite difficult to time the property market. So I always tell people, like, do not overbid. You bid for a price that if you need to sell it at a loss, or you minimize your chances of selling the property at a loss. So that's really the final stage of shopping for a property. And there is so much value to be captured in this phase, because this is really the phase where you can make the maximum amount of money when you buy your first property, or minimize your potential loss, like really heavily minimize your potential loss, so that when you exit the property, you can either sell it at cost or sell it at a small profit. So I hope you find this video useful. If you like this video, click a like and subscribe, and I look forward to sharing more tricks on how to buy your first property here in the UK with you. Okay, bye for now.